I want to welcome everyone who is participating in our Zoom meeting this afternoon in Basels. My name is Father Darrow. I'm the pastor here, and we began conversations in our times during the pandemic, and we're continuing to have it. I'm just admitting some people now into the room. Okay. I'd like to begin with a statement of welcome and a land acknowledgement. We at St. Basil's Parish regard the love of God to be the foundation of all life and ministry. We believe in the ever-present love of God as witnessed through Christ and empowered by the Holy Spirit. We believe that each person is loved by God and is of sacred worth. Therefore, through God's grace, we welcome all persons to our community. We express God's hospitality by creating a safe, healing, accessible, and transforming place for all to enter. Further, we acknowledge with gratitude and respect that we gather here on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin First Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory, and we uphold and uplift the voices and values of our host nation. Thank you. Back to Kevin.
Okay, so today is a book club, and we have an invited guest and 4 respondents from our own parish who will engage in a conversation about the book. And then after they have gone through a series of questions and responses, we will open up to questions from everybody else. And I ask that you would send your questions to me using the chat button, which is at the bottom of your screen, or maybe in the bar at the top.
Kevin Burns.
And if you could mute your microphones, please, as you're joining us. And part 1 will be a group conversation involving Maria Constantini, Mary Ross, Anne Galla, and John Power, all of whom are members of the St. Basil's Parish community. We'll get to know a little bit more about them through their questions, but I want to introduce you now to our guest. Most editors are comfortable in the shadows, in the back room, where they nurture those people known as the talent, the ones who get all the attention because it's their names that appear on the cover of the book. It's no surprise then that our guest today, one of the finest editors in Canada, when asked for her biography, gave 2 sentences, 22 words in all, 3 of which are her name. Allow me then to fill in just 1 or 2 gaps. Personal disclosure. From the turn of the millennium, I worked alongside Anne Louise Mahoney for 8 remarkable years when Novalis was still based at St. Paul University. I arrived with no background in editing and publishing. I learned about these things like an apprentice on the job, with her as my journey person, to use the language of apprenticeship. She was a generous mentor and a colleague, as I immediately discovered. For 3 decades now, Anne Louise Mahoney has been at the forefront of establishing and certifying professional standards for editors across Canada. She is one of the most prominent managing editors in publishing in this country. She works with authors, bishops' organizations, interfaith groups, international publishing partners, and that complicated species, writers. She is a formidable editor who oversees the implementation of the Novalis publishing program, essential parish resources and guides, and award-winning books of all kinds: memoir, prayer, history, theology, ethics, spirituality, social justice, faith and culture, and yes, even poetry. Launched right here in Ottawa in 1935 by Oblate Father André Gay, the goal of Novalis was to give Catholics of all ages access to materials that would help them in their faith development within the context of a typical parish. André Gay wanted creative, useful resources for the average Catholic, materials that moved smoothly from theory to practice, and that could reach the greatest number of Catholic readers by being produced in those days as inexpensively as they could. That aspiration of serving seekers and hopers and dreamers, and I think that would include everybody on this session today, continues with Novalis. But of the beyond counting changes since the founding of Novalis in 1935, I'll mention only two in relation to today's session. Novalis books and materials reach far beyond denominational Catholics. And second, what on earth is a typical Catholic parish today? Now, Anne Louise Mahoney has a remarkable gift as an editor, and it's this. She makes sure that each publication is never simply a text, an organized document, but is a book, a published work with its own engaging look and feel and architecture. This skill serves the need of readers, and it also challenges writers to become more creative and even clearer in the work that they produce. This is what gifted editors strive to do, and this is what our guest today does every day in her professional life. Finally, it is a delight to see that the book that is our focus today has her name actually emblazoned on the cover. This is a rare and good development. Please welcome, no longer in the shadows, editor, writer, translator, publishing expert, and today our very own book club leader, Anne Louise Mahoney.
Oh, that feels like a lot to live up to. Thank you so much, Kevin. I still miss working with Kevin. We had so much fun, but also we learned so much together along the way. So thank you. So I guess the first question is, where did this book come from? Where did this idea come from? Because books always start as ideas. Sometimes they take a long time to meet the world. This one, not so long. So I guess I would say that it came from my own life experience. I grew up in the post-Vatican II church. I saw lay people taking on roles that before the 1960s would have been closed to them, and that shaped me. When I was in around grade 2, our grade school got
the little square at the top.
Got a new principal. Instead of Sister Eileen, we now had a young layman who not only was married and had kids, but sang and played the guitar. He taught us the latest hymns, plus his entire Jim Croce and John Denver repertoire. He set up house leagues for sports and fun, but especially he showed us, without really knowing it, what an engaged lay Catholic could do and be. Thanks to Facebook, he and I reconnected a few years ago. I sent him a copy of the book to thank him for being such an important role model for me. He was amazed to be thought of that way. I'm sure many of our role models feel the same way. So I would say this book is a tribute to all those people, my mom and dad, my grandparents, my sisters, my teachers, people who agree to sit on parish council, the ones who run the bake sale to run the out of the cold supper, all those people, because they showed the way for the rest of us. So now here we are today, thinking about the current situation, and it's easy to feel discouraged about where the church is and where it's heading. I think we can all share in that discouragement at times. But I tend to be a very hopeful person and optimistic person, so I like to see what's possible, where we might be going in a good way. So I had the idea to bring together a number of Novalis authors who are experts in their fields and ask them to think about this question. Where are we now? And where, with the help of lay people, can the church go from here? Because it seems like this is a moment that's ripe for lay leadership. We all know the background story. There are fewer priests and there are lots of issues, and we need more people to be involved. But what does this mean in practical terms? So what I asked the authors to think about was, what are the possibilities? What are the challenges? And where do you find hope? That was a tall order. And also they only had about 10 pages to work with. So to start this conversation, I wrote to all of them, talked to them, and asked them just, look back and look forward. Where were we? Where are we now? Where are we going? And see what happens. So we covered a number of themes in this book. So liturgy, Catholic education, the role of women, sacramental preparation and religious education, social justice, ecology, science and religion, and moral theology and bioethics. Quite a wide range, but also a lot of depth there in the subject matter, I thought. So I think a lot of Catholics today may not have as much familiarity with some of those areas. So this book is an opportunity for them to learn more and figure out what their role is in that area. I just want to read a little bit from my introduction to the book, just to give you a flavor for the book itself before the book club meeting, the book club conversation starts. So here we go. From parish closures to fallout from the clergy sexual abuse scandal, to Catholics losing confidence in leadership, to financial mismanagement, to rising secularism, these are tough times for the church. Now more than ever, lay people are ready to work in partnership with the clergy and the hierarchy, to listen to the Spirit together. It's not just about more lay people doing things on a smaller scale, although all the regular things still need doing. It's about shared leadership, shared decision-making, shared mission. Many people say that one of the main issues affecting church life these days is the declining number of priests. In some parts of Canada, one priest is responsible for several parishes over a large area. He spends his days driving from one church to the next in all weather to serve God's people, and he's not getting any younger. More remote areas have intermittent access to clergy. No wonder this model is not sustainable. But that's not the only issue, and it's not even the main one. Even if the number of vocations to the priesthood were to increase dramatically, the church still needs an active laity who are ready and willing to carry out much of the church's mission alongside the clergy. Lay people are immersed in the world with all of its challenges and graces. Well-educated, faithful, and committed, they have the skills, the strengths, and the courage to embrace that mission and move the church's work forward. So what's stopping this? There's a quote from Pope Francis from Evangelii Gaudium. He says, lay people are, put simply, the vast majority of the people of God. The minority, ordained ministers, are at their service. There has been a growing awareness of the identity and mission of the laity in the church. We can count on many lay persons, although still not nearly enough, who have a deeply rooted sense of community and fidelity to the tasks of charity, catechesis, and the celebration of the faith. Awareness of this responsibility, grounded in their baptism and confirmation, does not appear in the same way in all places. In some cases, it is because lay people have not been given the formation needed to take on important responsibilities. In others, it is because in their particular churches, room has not been made for them to speak and act due to an excessive clericalism, which keeps them away from decision-making. So that's a little framing of the context here. So for many Catholics, their parish is a key point of contact for their faith. That's why it's important for parish committees to bring people together on the issues we talk about in the book. So one reason I was interested in being part of this session today was to hear other people's stories and insights as parishioners, as faithful Catholics, as Catholics who are still here, because we all know people who've given up. So that's why we decided to have a book club meeting today, so that everyone can listen in and hear about these thoughts and points raised in the book. We won't be able to cover everything. We're just asking people to talk about what really spoke to them. But it will give you a good overview. And as the Catholic world begins a synodal process ahead of the Synod on Synodality in 2023, it's a good opportunity to have this conversation and think about where the church can go from here, because the laity will be a big part of that process. So let's hear from the members of our book club today, John, Maria, Anne, and Mary, about what struck them in the book. What inspires them? What challenges them? And what gives them hope? So who would like to get started?
I can start if you want to.
Okay, great.
So my biggest sort of takeaway, or not really takeaway, my biggest question, I suppose, that I got when I was reading is what I didn't really understand, or I didn't really know that there's such a thing as lay ministers. So like people that actually get paid. Is there like careers where people get paid to be, what was the word they called it? A liturgist? No, yeah, in the first chapter about the lay liturgist, like they actually get paid to sort of actually tie a whole bunch of things together in parishes. And I think that sounds amazing. And I just didn't actually know that it existed. So for me, the big question is, if that's possible, why don't we have that? Or why isn't that everywhere? Why isn't there more careers sort of in the church? It seems to me like it's all volunteer. And if it could be that somebody could get paid to do that, that's what I took away from a few of those chapters. They said, you know, the lay ecclesial minister, the lay leader, the lay liturgist, and I didn't know about that so much.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because as the first chapter says, this is an important role to have a person who coordinates liturgy and to pay them for that, because it's a big job. But it's almost invisible, as it doesn't exist at the moment. And, you know, we expect the priest to do it all, or the priest and some volunteers to do it all. But it's such a key part of our faith that how could we not put more resources into that? I agree with you.
I think there are some roles like that. At least in the U.S., it seems to me when we traveled there and spent some time in Florida that there were some parishes that there was someone who I think was a lay liturgist who was paid, you know, ecclesiastical liturgist.
I think a question that came up when I read that, and I did sort of know about it, was it's money. I mean, what parishes do we know that could afford to have another full-time staff member? And as it's pointed out in many of the chapters, that they need to make a decent living. These people, if they are going to be and have the education that's required to do these jobs, that's a lot of education. I just thought the underlying factor that I took away from some of it is, where would we get the money from?
Yeah, I wondered that as well. And I just sort of started to think, but why isn't this something, if the church does have money, why isn't this something that we are putting money into? That was just one of my big questions.
But like anything, it's a question of priorities. So, you know, look at how much a parish is putting into renovations or the physical building, things like that. And you do have to do some of that, obviously, but what's your priority? Is your priority keeping your building, looking great, or is it really engaging people and welcoming people and giving them an experience of liturgy that really changes their lives?
Then I was wondering how much should come like right from the top? Like, should not every parish have something like this, or at least, 2 or 3 parishes together have one person? Like, should that not come right from the top, that's a priority in our church, like in all of our churches, was my sort of question.
Yeah, I love that idea. And Maria, I know you do a lot of work in sacramental preparation and religious education. I wondered if there was anything in those various chapters that either challenged you or gave you hope or inspired you.
Yeah, for sure. Something that really struck me is I get a little nervous because I know that there's people here like Jen and Heather from the board who were like religious consultants, and I respect them very much. And I'm a teacher at the Catholic school board. And one of the things that was said is that we're to give the lay people opportunities to explore their faith. And I think my school board does that. But it's such a strange thing for me to say. I almost feel like people need to be forced somehow, though, to attend certain things, because we are given lots of opportunities for professional development in our religious education, but it's maybe not made like part of our actual PD days. Like, we had a PD day the other day that was focused on anti-racism, and I think that's super important. We were forced to go and to be there and to listen, and I think that was wonderful. But I just wonder if we shouldn't be forced a little bit more to to get the education that we need. And because I just feel like some people just don't know. They just don't know. And, if we were forced to actually do some things at the church and be a part of the community, people would probably love it. It's just that we're not forced. And I don't know how to make that a reality. Nobody likes to be forced to do anything, but maybe that should be part of my job as a Catholic teacher. Maybe that should be something that I have to actually be somewhat involved in my parish in certain ways. I don't know. Anyways, just a thought. I think John Power might have something to say about that too.
I just wanted to mention that what you're saying brings up a gap that exists, which is this. As I was talking about my elementary school, that there was always a principal, was always a nun for as long as it was, since the school started. And then having lay people who were very close to the church and engaged and had studied, and they carried the ball for about 40 years. And now it's like another generation away from the original religious founding of schools. And because there hasn't been enough formation and education, there is that bit of a gap where people aren't as equipped as they used to be. And so how do we catch up there? How do we, I like your idea of saying, well, there are some things that are not optional. You need to go to this one. But do it in a way that people love it and want more.
Yeah, exactly. In a way that that it's not like, you don't want to be there.
There's a big gap. Years ago, we were required to, even in teachers' college, to opt for a few workshops or some professional development if we were going to teach for the Catholic School Board. We had many, many, many opportunities for workshops and presentations, Christian Community Day. That some of that still exists, and you're testifying to that, Maria. but we need Catholic teachers need to be trained. They need to be knowledgeable about their faith in order to pass it on, to teach the children, to catechize. And the requirement is not the same as it used to be. We were blessed. I was blessed with the Grey Sisters of the Immaculate Conception all through my childhood and my teaching career, for their guidance and their example. Many of those sisters were trained in theology and in catechesis, and they truly did practice their faith and proselytizing and teaching us. But that has changed. The sisters are not as great in number now. Many are aging. There aren't new people coming into the religious communities. So that's gone. So the responsibility, that's why I said earlier that when we were just chatting prior to the televised part, that reading the book was a little frightening and challenging, but at the same time, a tremendously encouraging. That's what I found when I read I can't summarize the whole book in a couple of sentences, but there are many things that challenge me in the reading. And one of them, Maria, was, and Catherine, or Anne Louise, is the need for educating our Catholic teachers if they're going to be able to pass on their faith. Times have changed. We live in such a secular world that people are expressing their faith now, and with a whole lot of background education in their Catholic faith, but they're expressing it by being involved in community projects and reaching out in social action, helping others, working in the community. And that's how they're expressing their faith. They're no longer as attached as they used to be in the past with a community such as ours at St. Basil's, in a parish community. So there's a whole element, and they're not hearing the preaching of the gospel. But they're still people of faith, and they're working hard, but that's how they're not connected to the parish anymore. And many are doing such wonderful work, but it's not the same as I'm not measuring it. I'm just saying it's different than it used to be. I'll stop there for now.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. So how do we make that connection for people between the gospel and the work they're doing? That's hard.
Maybe hopefully the conversations that we are about to have in the synodal process will extend invitations to people to seek further. Maybe the conversations will stir up that interest, and who knows what the Holy Spirit's going to challenge us to do, but it could change. But much of because the religious sisters and clergy are not as involved as they used to be, times have changed. For real, the laity, laymen and laywomen, are going to be challenged to say, where are we going from here? So the book, look into the laity and where can the church go from here?
Yeah. Someone asked me about the title. They found it a little bit provocative, saying, "Oh, are you saying that we should just take over and run everything?" And I said, no, not at all. It has to be working in partnership. But I said, I was picturing someone standing not at the back of the church, but on the altar, looking at the people's faces and looking at all those people who are there, who are showing up in spite of all the problems over the years, in spite of lots of reasons you could think of not to make time on your Sunday morning. And there they are. And so let's work with all those people, get their ideas, get their energy, get their ways of contributing, and bring everyone forward.
Well, Anne Louise, if I could just jump in for a minute, because I found the book to be a very well-written, well-researched. I think it would be a wonderful resource for beginning, this kind of training for the laity. The authors were so knowledgeable, and they were committed Catholics, and they certainly didn't shy away from identifying the really serious problems that we have in the church, with regard to sexism and racism and homophobia and clericalism and sexual abuse and so on. These were kind of, for me, common threads that were running through the book, through all of the articles, all of the chapters. There were some reference made to those. Well, for me, it was an empowering read too, because despite, my training as a teacher and so on, and my having gone to Catholic schools, I never actually thought of it in terms of myself being a priest, prophet, and king by virtue of my baptism. So that was actually news to me and kind of an empowering thing. I did always feel that my role as a Catholic educator and as a wife and mother was a vocation. And the Catholic schools that I had the privilege to teach in were communities where many gifts were shared for the benefit of the common good, which were some of the themes that were prevalent in Vatican II. So I just thought the book on the whole was extremely, well written. I was kind of taken with the chapter on lay women in the church by Catherine Mulroney. So I thought that was a very, very good book or a chapter. I also liked the fact that they traced things from a historical perspective into the present and future. Those were very, good threads for me too. So I thought it was extremely well done and would be a wonderful, each of the articles could be a webinar on its own. So yes. That might be something to think about in the future.
Yeah, it's really true. It was really full of things. So it's very hard to just talk about one. But I wanted to say to you as well, and everybody, that I loved, like you said, the way they pulled things from the Bible. Like when they pulled something from Paul here, I'm just going to read about the women in the church. And Paul, in his epistle to the Romans, said, "I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church at," I don't know how to say this word, Cenchrea or Cancrea, "so that you may welcome her in the Lord as it is fitting for the saints." Anyways, it's just that he pointed out specifically this woman and that she was a deacon. And that really made me think, wow, like there was women deacon back then. So why don't we have that now? So it made me really think. It was good to pull from history like that.
Well, I also thought it was interesting that Pope Francis, God love him, he tried to get a panel together to discuss the possibility of women deacon in the church, and they met for 3 years, and they couldn't even decide on that particular aspect, like what was the historical significance of women, in the laity in the early church. So I was, or as roles as deacons in the early church. So I was really struck by the glacial change, the glacial pace of change. That they met for 3 years, could not decide on that, and then he's now started another panel to discuss it, and they're still taking their time on that as well. There's been no decision. So anyway, those were very interesting.
Yeah, it's true that can't do it there. Progress is very slow.
All right. No, they did make one important decision.
I just found the book. I should say something. Anne Louise, it was so good. I wasn't expecting to be as enthralled by it or could get as much out of it as I did. I read it twice. I've got all sorts of sticky notes and yellowed out parts of it. I really did appreciate it. I think it's excellent. I would recommend that anybody would read it. It's easy to read, and the references and the knowledge that the people, the various contributors have, I thought was quite fascinating. In parts of it, I got annoyed. I must admit, that's me. I'm not an educator like the other three, but I do have a lot of feelings. I grew up in the system. I have aunts who are nuns, a cousin is a priest. I went to Catholic schools. The nuns was the principals, etc., and accepted it as it was. But after the Vatican II, I expected to see change, and I didn't, and I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And the point that Maria just brought up, I've got it marked here. In May 2016, yes, 3 years passed after Pope Francis announced the panel that he'd put together. Nothing happened. And as of right now, when he tried again in 2020, nothing. I find that very frustrating. Mm-hmm. But we're not giving up. I mean, none of us are going to give up. But where do we start? How do we change it? It's failing, and we have got to stop it. That's how I feel, and I think that's what, looking at through the Laity, I think that's what it gave me, a sense of we're not giving up. There's hope. We have to continue.
Yeah.
Through the Laity.
That's a really good point, because all of the contributors to this book have probably at least 30 years experience in their profession in the church, whether in liturgy or teaching or all sorts of things. And they're still there, and they are frustrated too, but they're still there, and they're still offering ideas, suggestions, encouragement. So that encouraged me. Mm-hmm. And when I asked, they're all very busy people. They had many writing projects as well as their regular work. And every single one of them said yes to doing this. You know, they all felt it was something important for them, almost in a way, a bit of a legacy project, to just kind of say where they were on this journey and what their hopes are.
Each of them inspired me. I learned something from each of them, and Anne said, or someone said, that many people could read this book and learn so much. Mm-hmm. I was so just a small little one in the one on morality and formation of conscience, and I learned that I just learned so much. And when they were talking about there was one of the chapters on science and science in the church, the Pope and all, I guess, the previous popes too. There's a group of lay people and some clergy, 80 in fact, who are lifelong members of this advisory group that the people in the magisterium, the Pope, with whom they connect, and they when they're going to make a publication or a statement of any kind, there's not necessarily a consensus, but there's a discussion, and there's a learning that takes place in trying to understand, so that the church and science are not enemies. They're working together. That was fascinating. And
yeah,
well, in a way, lay people are a bit like editors working in the shadows, but shaping ideas and actions. So I think we shouldn't feel too discouraged that things are slow, because things are happening behind the scenes. We don't always know about them or hear about them, but even having this synod that's going to consult in every diocese in the world, I mean, that's possible because of technology today. It's not something that could have been done easily 60 years ago. But that's a hopeful sign. And I think, the bishops they know that people who are still there in the church they want to have a voice and shape the future.
Do they realize, I guess they may, but do they realize, though, that women are saddened that their voice and, their interpretation of the gospel is not really something that's reflected in the liturgies always or in homilies? And that was a point that was brought up throughout the book, too, that, women feel that they don't see themselves represented because they may have a different viewpoint than one that's being expressed by the male liturgist. So I think those were such eye-opening, or at least ideas that were worth exploring, I thought, and I wondered if they were aware, of the feelings.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure some are, and my theory is that bishops who have sisters or cousins or friends or nieces who will speak up, I think they're more likely to be aware of these things. So, but if someone went to seminary and didn't have women friends, or, just has never really been close to people who want to share those feelings, they may not be as aware. I mean, they should be, but who knows?
There was just a little humorous aside in the book, too, that the author did mention about her daughter, who was watching the parade of cardinals coming in after the election of Pope Benedict, saying, "What do you mean only men can elect the Pope?" So the next generation, she said she thought she'd given her daughter, a little bit of a skewed point of view. But however, I just thought that was kind of humorous, because the younger generation they can't understand this. And of course, we are losing so many young members to, there are so many other, these are issues that are so powerful and so necessary to change. So I just, but I thought that was rather humorous.
That's the fresh eyes of the younger generation saying, "No, we wouldn't put up with that." Yeah.
Someone shared with me yesterday, I was mentioning this webinar and the book that I had just read 2 or 3 times, and she made a hand movement just like this, saying, "Oh, we've given up a long time ago. We don't care anymore." And it frightened me. And I said, there is hope, and we need to listen. And
that makes me really sad too, John. It really does. It does. It makes me very sad, because for me, I want people so badly to be able to have beautiful experiences. And I don't know how to get them to do that. Like, I want them to come to the church and to see how beautiful and welcoming our congregation is. I want them to, I would love it now. Maybe now that COVID happened for such a reason, that maybe we're going to appreciate coming together more. So maybe we can get people together, not just for mass. Maybe we can have different things in our church to bring people in. And because I just think people don't realize how beautiful it can be. And I think that's what frustrates me so much. Like, when I do the sacramental preparation and the parents are with me, and I do the talks for confirmation, and then we do acts of service together. And I have so many parents, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. And this is so great. And it's so wonderful." And, but people just don't know. And I just want to bring them and help them to know. But it frustrates me, because I don't really know the answers to get them to see how beautiful it can be.
This synodal process that we're embarking on will send out invitations to not just people in the parish, but to everybody. And when we had a meeting yesterday at our church, there were 23 of us, and someone raised the possibility of, why don't we invite our people were saying that my children and my adult children and their children don't go to church anymore. They bring them to be baptized, and then we or celebrate the sacraments, and then they're not seen for a while. but they don't regularly go. Why don't we invite if there's going to be a discussion, an open discussion, and we need to listen to people, why don't we invite our brothers and sisters and our sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law and our children? Why don't we invite them to share? So there are possibilities, and that's why I say I think there's hope. We talked a lot about our Pope is saying, allow the Spirit to work within us.
Well, here's one hopeful note, is that I sent a copy of the book to someone who teaches in a seminary, and she decided to use the book in her course on the church today or something like that. So we've got a few seminarians out there having a look at this wide variety of topics. Is there any other topics people want to address as we wind down this part of the discussion and open things up for more questions? Anything that really spoke to you that you weren't expecting, or that made you happy to see that, or that challenged you?
Well, the chapter certainly on the environment was extremely well done. Also, I sort of spent my energies in terms of comments on the women's laity, so I don't want to, but I think that was a very important chapter as well. And there were, again, the same themes that were addressed in, all of because he did bring in things relating to, women and so on in that chapter. But I thought that was another extremely well done. They were all excellent. I really felt, empowered by reading the book, and I learned a lot, both historically and in present times.
And one thing that was in that chapter that I thought was amazing. I'm always looking for practical solutions. I'm always looking for ways that we can fix things. And one of them said, take nature walks with fellow parishioners. And I just think that's something that we just need to do. We need to do different sorts of things, like nature walks with the parishioners. Get your kids out and go for a nature walk, but turn it into something Catholic. Turn it into something where we go for a nature walk as a all of our families with the younger kids or the teenagers, and we talk about our Creator and the indigenous flavor to it, our Creator, and look what our Creator has made for us. Look what God has made for us. And I just think there has to be different ways of getting people to embrace our Catholic roots, our Christian roots. And I just thought that was a nice thought. Take nature walks with parishioners.
That's great, Maria. Anyone else have any just final thoughts before we move into the Q&A portion?
Anne Louise, I mentioned the chapter by Moira McQueen on the role of laity in moral theology and bioethics, but I didn't finish the sentence, and I know I started it, but she gives a wonderful summary on page 127, and it really speaks to all of the chapters, and I'll just briefly read it if I may. Lay people need to take this mission seriously and realize that our vocational responsibilities don't end with caring just for our marriage and our family. There are many opportunities for lay mission work in moral theology and bioethics alone, and in all of the other issues raised in the other chapters. That's my addition. Separately from our full-time work and careers, lay people are needed to develop the many ethical, bioethical, and justice aspects of Catholic social teaching, such as using important church teachings like Laudato Si as a platform for ecological, political, and social action, dealing with individual health and health of the planet, parish study groups, school groups, community action, etc. So it's a wake-up call for laity, not the good people who are, yes, the good people who are already involved to continue, but for new people to awaken people to, yes, we need to act, believe and act.
Very good.
So it's a wonderful summary at the end of her chapter.
Mary, any final thoughts?
No, but anybody who hasn't read the book, I really suggest that they do.
And Anne, how about you?
Well, I would highly recommend the book. I know that though some things that might be holding some people back from the Laity are the severe and serious problems plaguing the church. And so I think those really need to be addressed in order to attract people back. Unfortunately, a lot of people have left. They didn't feel that, they could continue to be a part of, and as Maria said so beautifully, you can get so much spiritual, gratification by being part of a community like St. Basil's. Our wonderful liturgies. We've had really such almost professional liturgists in our wonderful Heather Reed and Carmel Horn and all of these wonderful people who have been involved for so many years. I've been a part of so many wonderful liturgies there. And so I just think, though, that we have to address those serious issues. We can't just, pretend they're not there. So that was one of the things that I think is important. But
yeah, I just wanted to read a little section. The afterword in the book is really worth spending time with. It. A conversation with lay theologian Catherine Clifford from St. Paul University and Archbishop Paul-André du Rocher of Gatineau. Anyway, it's a good read. So it ends with this paragraph. Responding to the challenges of our times requires more comprehensive models of faith formation for all the baptized. It also demands a stronger culture or attending to both training and theological education for those engaged in mandated ecclesial ministries within the church, and for those who aspire to bring their faith perspective to the broader cultural reflection on issues such as social justice, peace, and scientific progress, to name but a few. To this end, Catholic communities will need to mobilize to invest personal and financial resources in education and training. It will mean transforming the culture of Catholic communities from one that depends primarily on personal loyalty and volunteerism to one that values personal competence and courageous vision. The world expects it. Our faith demands it. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I've heard as we've been chatting, I'm hearing there's still some hope. I'm hearing there's some passion for our communities of faith and that it's worthwhile and that together we can do anything we can to keep things moving and so that the future of the church is brighter. So I think we're going to open this up to more conversation with the broader group. I just wanted to mention 3 phrases that have really stayed with me since I worked on the book. The first is, Father, you know you can't do it all. Second is, we're here and we want to help. And the third is, we each have a role to play. To me, that sums up the book. And it gives us a starting point for action.
Well, thank you, Anne Louise, and thank you, Book Club. There's a lot of question and comment in the boxes, but I would cluster them actually into 2 big boxes. One is about education, and the other one is about sexism. So let me deal with the education one first, because there's a whole lot of them. But a summary education question has asked, in my experience arising in current research I'm leading, is the challenging reality that generally our church may not be offering the adult faith accompaniment education that empowers the laity to offer the very leadership and important decision-making they are called to. It seems to be we need both a perspective shift and a shift in priorities. What are your thoughts about this? Asks the questioner.
Well, I can start because this is a point that comes up in the afterword as, and I should tell you that I first invited Professor Clifford and Archbishop Durocher to write the introduction to the book. And they said, we'd like the lay people to speak first, and then we'll respond. I thought that was a very good model. But what they're saying is, yes, we need education, we need formation. We can't rely on people doing that on their own or having had that formation way back when. We need to support that, and that's good for the church as a whole. So how that happens is another story because, of course, yes, it comes down to funding. And, for me, that if you set your priorities in a healthy way, that funding becomes available because it's essential. So that's my thoughts. Maybe some of the others or other participants on the call.
The chapters in education affirm that there's a tremendous need for training and ongoing professional development for people in not just in schools and hospitals, but in other places of work as well, to educate people. The summary at the end, the afterword. I've never heard that before, but anyway, the afterword. It's excellent. It sums it up beautifully, and both authors did a marvelous job.
I think also that there are opportunities for people who are really interested can take university courses at St. Paul's. There's a lot of wonderful training available for people who want to take advantage of that. But that would be something that they would do outside of the parish. But it would be wonderful, to have more. But you do have to get people to come. Sometimes Father offers these things, or there's some training available that people don't come to,
So, Anne, can I jump in on that? Because there's a comment here. Someone doesn't want to ask the question, but it's a comment that says, okay, they agree with what you've just said. But the comment is, I think everyone needs to know that both in the Archdiocese and the Catholic school boards, the emphasis on adult faith formation actually has been set aside. Previously, though, both the local school board and the Archdiocese and St. Paul University did try to provide opportunities for all adults, teachers, and parents to grow in their faith. Unfortunately, under the leadership of all three entities, has abandoned any commitment to adult faith formation. That's the comment. What are your thoughts about that?
Wow.
I think that leads to the whole question of how do we get people to do it? That's what I said at the beginning. I said there's lots of opportunities. They're everywhere. It's just getting people there. And, to be very, very honest, I have zero answers for that because I don't know how to get people to come to things. And that's where that's what makes me a bit sad.
Can I speak? Am I allowed to speak, Kevin? Yes? I was the one who said that. And that's because I was involved in it for years. And that's my cynical and my frustration because we tried so hard and I worked at all three of those levels for adult faith formation. And we did have it for a while under previous leadership and it's all gone. So unfortunately, Maria, the opportunities are not there. The school board doesn't work with the diocese. The diocese and the school board don't work with St. Paul's. St. Paul's it's not happening anymore. So it's a real frustration because it did happen. And we had parents and we had teachers and we had parish people all getting faith formation, all with all kinds of opportunities. And it hasn't happened for, I would say, at least 10 years.
So why did it go away? Like why did
because the leadership of all three entities let it go. It wasn't considered a priority.
I tried to say that earlier, but thank you, Heather. That's wonderful.
And unfortunately, I look at Bill Merve here, and Bill would be able to agree with that from his perspective at St. Paul's. Joan Cronin's on here. Joan Cronin knows that that's what happened. Like, it's just the frustration with the leadership because, yes, we're laity, and we cannot do it on our own. There has to be, as Anne Louise said, we have to work together. But if the leadership, who unfortunately controls the purse strings, are not on board, it's not going to happen. I mean, I'll tell you a wonderful experience for me with Archbishop Gervais. He gave me money to go and study liturgy in the States. He thought it was so important that lay people could do that. He did that. And I was very grateful for that. My teachers union gave me money to go and study, but it doesn't happen anymore. And there's nothing, the opportunities aren't there.
Yeah,
so I'm sorry to be so cynical, but
no, it's true that
I've been there, done that.
The opportunities, when I speak of the opportunities, you're right. That's what I mean. The opportunities are there but they're not like, they're there just like, you can do this on your time. You can do that on your time. You can do this on your time. And it's very hard to do that, right? So that's where I wonder, like when I say we need to be forced, or maybe not forced, but coerced and
mandatory.
Or even like you said, Heather, like given the money, given the, like here, this is here for you. During one of your school days, you get to go and do this, or you get to one of your work days, or whatever it might be. Anyways, I could go on and on about that, but that's
and probably before your time, Anne Maria, one PD day at least a year was towards adult faith formation.
Yes,
we had Catholic school boards who had full-time people hired just to do adult faith formation. We had dioceses that did that, but they are few and far between now.
May I ask a question or make a comment? Is that okay with the chair?
Go ahead.
I'm not a member of the book club, and I confess I didn't read the book, so I'm sorry, but I will. But my background, I studied at St. Paul University in theology a few years ago and loved every second of it. But I think, to go to what Anne was saying earlier, you used the word empower. And I think that's where the answer lies, in the sense that we need to have opportunities to learn. And I think they do exist, whether they're coordinated or not. I mean, St. Paul's is excellent, and there are other excellent places. But I think the key is to empower lay people, and especially women, in the church itself, so that there's some point to getting the education. Because I was lucky the diocese gave me some money to do the theology study in adult faith formation, which was brilliant. But I've had the chance to go ahead and do some small faith groups now in our community, because the parish priest sort of said to me, now do something with this, But that's, I think, that link that's missing too. It must be something we can use, not just to have it in our head, which is brilliant, but also to use it. So, for example, if a woman's very good at liturgy, or a man, there has to be the opportunity in the parish for that person to use those skills once they've acquired that education. So it can't be a dead end once you get to Mass and you throw it out at the door, because it doesn't matter whether you've got it or not. I believe very strongly we have to empower our lay people to use what they learn. And that's really the nuts and bolts of it. There's no point to learn. I mean, it's sheer pleasure, but it's of no pleasure at all if we don't share it with others and somehow grow as a church, because that we have grown as individuals. So anyway, I think the empowerment is the key word. And I think it's at the level of the parish that we have to find these gifted people in our parish and let them speak and teach and learn and lead, along with the priest and so on. So that's my 5 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Can I flip that to a question from Kathleen Kelly? Because I think this takes what you've said and focuses a question that I'm sure might get a little bit of reaction. Why would women choose to participate in an institution which does not have gender equality, something we would not accept in other areas of our lives?
Exactly.
This is the question. I struggle with this question every single day.
But it's worth doing.
For sure.
We can do it.
I used to have this idea that I would organize a volunteer strike for 6 months, women volunteers, so that they would do nothing for 6 months and see what was left in the parish after that. I mean,
it would grind to a halt.
Women's role is massive.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
It's the majority.
That's almost evil, but it's true.
It's including,
it's a gift. Mm-hmm.
Including teaching the children the faith. It just pervades a woman's whole faith life. So I share that frustration, but it's either do you work from within or do you criticize from outside? And I just choose to work from within.
Good.
That's all I can do.
I think we're lucky that you do, Anne Louise, because you've made a powerful contribution just with this one book.
It's funny because when I presented this idea to the Novalis publishing board where we discussed projects, and I offered to leave the Zoom meeting so they could talk when I wasn't there. And they said, oh, no, it's okay. And they said, it's so important that lay people speak up and do these things. And one of them said, and you're doing that. And I said, oh, I am. But I think there are lots of ways we can further the conversation. And part of it is speaking to each other and speaking to those people who are fed up and try and say, well, here's why I'm still there. And I see a way forward.
One of your closing comments in your in the introduction, Anne Louise, is you said lay people have an important role to play in evaluating and thus shaping the future of the church.
Yeah, I truly believe that.
I do too.
But often it has to start. I was talking to some friends this morning and, the state of the world, the state of the church, and how do you keep going? And my answer is I stay local. I go really small. So it's my parish. It might not even be my parish one week. It might just be the 4 people from my parish that I know understand what I'm feeling in that moment. So, kind of tag on with someone who's feeling more positive or more strong and kind of draw on their resilience when you need it. But I think it's worth staying for me. That's why I do.
I think it's easy for us to just complain, but it's like you said, we just have to try to keep on doing things about it. And if that means, volunteering to do sacramental preparation, or if that means volunteering to just do something small, do coffee Sundays, if that means volunteering, it's just whatever people can give, I think makes a huge difference. And hopefully people will just start to see that and just keep on acting.
Before we move, sorry, go ahead, Anna.
It was Mary. I was just about to say to Maria that unless we have more people like you're young, and you do a fantastic job, and I know everybody agrees, but unless we get more young people like you involved the same way with faith formation and their children, then we're not going to move forward, because it's the younger people, I feel, that we need.
Mm-hmm. Can I just put in this question that's come up while we're on this issue of gender and identity, and it's a plaintiff appeal. It says, well, okay, so what can be done about the messaging of the church? Catholic parents of gay children are hurting and embarrassed about the reputation of the church. So I just add that into it. Our focus for the last few minutes has been about male, female, different responses. So what would you say to that person?
So we always talk about the church as if it's this one monolithic thing where everyone thinks the same way. And often the people you hear, the voices you hear the most are the ones that are seeing things more in black and white. So I would say to anyone who's struggling, find the voices that are speaking to your issue in a compassionate way, because they're out there. There are tons of priests and sisters and all sorts of people working with gay Catholics, for example. Like Father Jim Martin in the US, this is one of his big areas of interest. He's written a book about it. He gives talks all the time. He's a Jesuit. He's a committed Catholic, and he's still speaking on this issue in a way that shows love and compassion and welcome. So, if you're hearing negative voices, seek out the positive voices. Like take the time to really look around online and find out who's speaking to your issue in a way that's life-giving, because those voices are valid too.
I love that.
It is not a Novalis book, but his book on prayer, which new this year, is a phenomenal piece of work that does exactly what you just said, Anne Louise.
Mm.
We just finished a webinar in the parish this week on single mothers and the need for them to find a place. Many don't feel that there's a place within our Catholic communities, and we need first to be aware of it, and then secondly to do something about it, to listen first and find out what it is, what the need is, and there are many other groups besides the people with special needs.
I mean, that's the value of community, is that wherever you are in the world, if you find a church, that can be your community and your family. And so that when you do need support as a single mom or a whatever, that's your place. And people get to know you and they want to help you. Such a tangible way to share the faith. And it's easy to do.
We can influence other parishes as well. We learn from what's happening in other communities. We may not have everything right in our own parish, and by again awareness, being aware of what's happening in the larger community.
But I do think we have to be aware of the frustration of so many people. For example, mothers who have gay children. So many people I know have left because they don't feel their children are embraced and accepted. So I don't know. These are such huge issues that we can't really solve. That is, I guess, maybe a frustration. Is the church leadership interested, and does it have the will to take the necessary steps to enact real change that's going to attract people back to the church? I guess I don't want to be negative. I have hope, but I think that we can't also gloss over the issues that are at the root of a lot of people leaving. I know yesterday in our webinar, they talked about the ship moving very slowly when it's trying to turn, but so the church being the ship, but I don't know whether the hierarchy realizes that there's an iceberg on the horizon and that some people have already left the ship, because they don't want to inflict any more damage on, their children or what they feel are the issues. So I'm sorry to, I don't want to be negative, but I think we need to be realistic that these are things that can only be solved by the hierarchy in a lot of cases.
Could I make a comment? I'm not in the study group. I live in Toronto. My name is Jean, and I studied theology 30 years ago and have been updating regularly. But it seems that the same issues are still happening today that were happening 30 years ago. And as we're talking about so many different areas, we're basically talking about collaboration and partnership between hierarchy and the laity. And I think one of the shifts that hopefully will take place if we continue to be involved as Francis wants us to be, is that we will move from this hierarchical model of them and us to one that's more collaborative, of a community model where together the Spirit's working through all of us, not just the hierarchy. So that is my hope. And I've been in the church for my whole life and been very active in the church. And it is sometimes very frustrating, but I'm not giving up because I feel the Spirit's still working through us. And I'm not sure I'm going to be around for that ship to change, but
I know what you mean.
It changes course, but hopefully it will. And I have hope in Francis and his leadership, but partnership to me is what we need, and we can't do it by ourselves.
Great.
That's my opinion.
And with other people outside our own parishes too, not just our own little parish, you know, we need to have partnerships with many others.
I
So I
felt
think we have
hopeful.
time. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I felt hopeful after our meeting about the synod that we, did agree, or we are planning to try to embrace other people, get other people in to discuss those issues in depth, the ones who are directly affected. So that to me is a key to getting, real input for the synod, with those disaffected people who can tell us, exactly what their issues are and why they have left. That was encouraging and hopeful.
So we're winding down to about the final three comments, I think. I'm going to ask, oh dear, sorry, I have to scan down. Oh, yes, Janice Elsa Etier, you can ask your question now, please, if you could unmute yourself. And then after that, we're going to go to Bob Cherney.
I can't. I think I'm still muted.
You're not. We can hear you clearly.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, when earlier people were speaking about the women's group studying with the diaconate for women, the second group that was appointed to study the issue of women being deacons in the church they determined that women had been deacons in the history of the church. That fact is now embraced by Pope Francis. It's been accepted by a lot of clergy members, and that's a huge step for us going forward. Because for a long time, even that was not accepted, but it's been proven now by that second group that we were deacons. And the other thing is that even if you're a woman who has a degree in theology from a Catholic institution, and a few of us are in that boat, when we go to our priest and say, hey, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to do that. Hey, I'd like to run a stewardship education program, for example. I've got this degree. I know about homiletics. I know how to speak in front of a group. And I know Catholic theology, and we can sit together and talk about the message. You still get, well, you talk too much, you're too loud. Basically what you get is, you're a woman and I don't want to hear you, and I'm not putting you up there. I have come up against this in many, many churches. And since I joined the Catholic Church, it's been almost 10 years. I've found it almost all the time. So that even if we have gone to a Catholic institution and learned our Catholic theology and are accredited, we still we don't get the recognition, because the church is so institutionalized in its attitude that only men can teach in the church and only men can lead in the church. There's a lot of women who want to lead as lay leaders, myself among them.
Thank you, Janice. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've got two more questions before we leave. Bob Cherney,
Okay.
Can you unmute yourself? You're next, please.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I think the Amazon Synod should give us encouragement. Not only what was said by the majority of the people there, but then echoed by Pope Francis in his follow-up document that basically said that that lay people were essential to how the church was operating in the Amazon, among indigenous peoples in particular. But the meta message was back to the bishops of the Amazon area and the church there, the body of the church. You people work it out, okay? Don't expect Rome to choose among a bunch of of rival proposals and say, I like this one 60%, and that's more than I like any other, so that's what it's going to be from now on. No, don't expect that kind of centralized authority, top-down decision. Instead, work it out in a way that you really feel the Spirit is telling you this is what makes sense in your area, and explain that to us, and that's the right direction to go. So in response to many of these comments this afternoon, most recently from Joan Dennis in Toronto and others, let's work it out. And I'll just add one other thing, that there's a tendency when we're, somebody uses the phrase, read the signs of the times, look at the signs of the times. Well, let's look at this stuff. But then when somebody says, okay, I'm looking at the signs of the times in the light of tradition and in the light of the book of this and that, say, you know what? You're looking at your books too much. You're not really looking at what's going on now. So put the books aside for a while and really look at what's going on.
Thank you, Bob. I want to wrap up this section by going back to our guest, Anne Louise Mahoney, now, and say, Anne Louise, final short comment from you. What have you heard this afternoon that surprised you?
There's a lot of frustration out there. I expect to hear that from people who've given up. It's a bit more sobering to hear it from people who are still here. But it's important. We can't sweep that under the carpet. It's there and it's significant. So I guess I always feel like I have to hold that frustration because that motivates me, but I can't get bogged down in it because that defeats me. So it's, how do we find that balance? And for me, that is spending time with like-minded people who can see a way forward. It's reading authors who give me that hope. So always finding that balance so that I don't just get into the negative, the church changes too slowly, no one is going to listen to me. Just always find other people, kindred spirits who can support you.
I would like to go out for tea sometime, Anne Louise.
Let's do it.
I'll come.
Okay, we're all going.
It's going to be a busy, it's a busy room. We now thank you. Formal thank yous coming up. We now turn our attention to John Williams, also a member of the St. Basil's Parish Community, who I think you may know, Anne Louise.
Thank you very much. I'm also a former author with Novalis, although it was before Anne Louise's time, and maybe it would have been more successful if she had been the editor. I followed this discussion with great interest, and I tried to pull together a few of the threads that we heard throughout the afternoon. I think as far as the book is concerned, there was pretty well unanimous agreement that it's a good book. People were excited by it. People recommended that others read it. There is one perhaps, well, there is no criticisms really, except perhaps one, and that is a question that was raised early on, I think by Maria, of affordability. A lot of the contributors were proposing things that would be very beneficial. The ones that were mentioned were the paid liturgist, the parish pastoral assistant, others were included, social justice officer, and then the question that was raised, well, how would these be paid for? And I had the impression from the contributors of the book that they were hoping that the development that investments would pay off, that if the church would actually put money into these positions, they would be so successful in drawing new parishioners and invigorating old ones that basically the finances would improve to the extent that that these positions could be afforded, and maybe other initiatives as well. How realistic that is at this time, it's hard to say. Some of the religious orders and dioceses have declared bankruptcy. There's huge bills to pay for the victims of clerical abuse, residential school survivors, and on and on. So there are real questions as to whether the book should have been so optimistic that it's possible to go in this direction, or whether we should be basically preparing for a smaller church and one that will live within its means and operate in a very different way. And that would involve, of course, more involvement of the laity and probably to continue it as volunteers. So that's one issue that was raised, one important issue, I think. There was a lot of discussion about religious education and how it's fallen by the wayside and what can be done about that. And I think that people despaired of that and at the same time saw how important it is, but how it's going to be remedied is very difficult. The culprits were pointed out to be those in authority. And it's clear from the discussion that that's not a priority for the school boards and the dioceses and so on. How to turn that around is a question. And even if there were requirements to study theology, would it be just for teachers of religion, or it would be for all teachers at Catholic schools? No doubt there'd be a huge pushback from the teachers and possibly probably the unions too, who have now for some time been accustomed not to having this this requirement in addition to everything else that they're supposed to be doing. The question of hope continued throughout especially the latter part of the webinar. And I think in line with one of Anne Louise's last comments, it would seem that the panelists are more hopeful than the other participants in this webinar. And it is hard to be hopeful for sure. And there has to be a good reason for hope, I think. And whether we have good reasons for hope now, or whether we're just in it, to support an almost hopeless cause is a good question. But that's an ongoing issue that's important especially for recruiting others, because if we can't be convinced ourselves that there is a hopeful future ahead and this is how you get there, then those who are less hopeful than us and who have given up altogether are quite unlikely to be convinced. The synod was mentioned as a possible way forward, and that really remains to be seen. At St. Basil's, I think we've made a good start on that process of involving the parishioners, but we'll just see how far it goes and what support it gets from in other parishes at the diocesan level and higher up after that. Anne Louise mentioned among the three phrases in the book that really stood out is that the one that says we each have a role to play. One of the something that was absent, I think, in the book was the two things actually I found that weren't really discussed there but taken for granted. One is theology and the need for reform of theology as well as reform of many other aspects of church life. But the other, I think that it's more pertinent here is the canon law, because the canon law really determines who has what roles. Canon law is responsible for the inferior role of women in the church. And really to do anything about that at the institutional level requires a change in canon law. So it's not as so clearly patriarchal and authoritarian as it is at present. And that prevents major changes from taking place. Canon law, there was a code of canon law developed in, I don't know, I've lost my video here. In 1919, many changes were introduced at Vatican Council. In the 60s, the next revision of the Code of Canon Law, which is the one that's in effect now, took place in the 80s or 90s. So it just takes a long, long time to bring about changes in the church. Now, there have been minor adjustments in some canon laws recently, but if you look through the whole thing, it still reflects totally clericalism, which the Pope has identified as one of the most serious, if not the most serious defect of the current church. And that affects all possibilities of reform. And I'm not sure how to deal with that, except to realize that there is a root cause for a lot of the problems of the church today, and it shouldn't be underestimated. So those are the highlights for me, at least, and I found it a very rich discussion, and I'm very grateful to all the participants for their contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We now invite Father Gerald Winkler to make some closing comments.
Thank you, all our participants. Thanks to Kevin for monitoring this, but Anne Louise for saying yes to our invitation to discuss this important book. I agree, the conversation was rich this afternoon. So your book has really had impact. I know it's not just in Ottawa. I know they're discussing the book in other cities in the world. And as you've mentioned, it's being used for courses. And so little probably did you know the impact the book would have in creating conversations. People have said that it's obvious that there is anger, frustration. And I'm just remembering a quotation by St. Augustine. And probably many of you have heard this quotation before. It says, hope has two daughters. The first is anger, and the second is courage. Anger to, what does it say? Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are. We feel that. Lots of people feel that. I'm Indigenous. My mother was a survivor of those schools. So, I'm not a woman, but there's lots of people, men and women, who are very angry at the church and feel frustration and so forth. But what we really need to is courage to change the way things are. And so, I like when you said that you wanted to cling on to resilience. I think that's important too. We provide a gift for our speaker. I don't have it in my hands, but I have a niece, and she is a beader. She beads. And we've been able to give our speakers little medallions, something symbolic of who the person is. And that's what we're going to do for you, Anne Louise. Soon as, artists and beaders, and they take a long time to get their work done. They don't work well.
Beading is a slow process too.
Yes.
Tell her to take her time.
Okay. So and then we have other things for you.
That's lovely. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that. I really want to thank Anne Louise is going to get more requests for doing these kinds of webinars. I know that, but I really want to thank John Power, and I want to thank Maria Constantini, for Anne Galla and Mary Ross, who this is a new kind of experience for some of them, although they're teachers and speakers and stuff, but they had some anxiety about how this would turn out. They did a great job. And I thought their insights were really helpful to us. They provided great conversations. And finally, I want to thank John Williams for, really engaging in this, and thanking Anne Louise for her conversation. And as usual, Kevin, as is typical, Kevin is really brilliant doing this. We're very fortunate to have him in the parish to lead these kinds of webinars. And that's all I have to say. So thank you for everyone for attending today. Oh, wait, our next webinar is with Mark Carney. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
Mark Carney. He will be, I think Kevin, do you remember the date?
It's December the 12th at 2:30.
So it's about a month from now at 2:30 on a Sunday afternoon. And the topic is really, it's coming from his book, Values. And he was a presenter at COP, 26 and in Glasgow. So he's a practicing Catholic. I think he's a member of St. Joseph's Parish when he's in Ottawa. And anyways, it'll be a rich conversation also. So thank you all for joining. Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne Louise.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, Anne Louise. It was a privilege to read the book, and please extend that to all of the contributors.
Sure. And thanks, Mary and Maria.
Thank you.
Well, in person one of these days.